Well, a very pleasant good morning to our colleagues, our partners, members of the Small Business Association, members of the small business community, and not only in Barbados, but across the region. A special welcome to those who may be joining us from other parts of this hemisphere. It's good to have you on the call with us this morning. I'm Dr. Lynette Holder, the Chief Executive Officer of the Small Business Association of Barbados, and I'm very pleased to have you join us for our regional colloquium. And this is a key event of Small Business Week 2024. A little bit about us, in case you may not be aware. The Small Business Association of Barbados is the country's representative body for the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. The SBA, in operations now for a little over 40 years, has been a strong advocate for an enabling environment for the small business community here. The services of the association also include the provision of training and educational opportunities and mentorship. The Small Business Week is a key feature of the association's platform, where each year during the month of September, the organization hosts a week of activities to help us in our effort, in our mission to highlight the contribution of the MSME sector to economic and social development. Small Business Week is now in its 21st consecutive year of having this week of activities. And therefore, we are very pleased to have you join us as we look at what we consider to be a value-added component to the week of activities, not just focusing on our domestic space and our domestic conditions, but also exploring what is needed at the regional level to help us ensure we have an enabling environment for the sector. So I'm very pleased that you're here with us as we examine the topic today of small business as a catalyzer for regional economic growth. We're going to examine, we're going to distill this. We have an esteemed team of persons to help us in this regard. So as they say, as you take your flight, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's presentation. Let me remind you that we will have a question and answer segment, and we are going to invite you to pose your questions in the chat section on the Zoom platform, and our panelists will have the opportunity to engage you in your queries and in Q&A segment. So why a regional colloquium, you may ask? Beyond the fact that we appreciate MSMEs cannot expand, cannot grow with a focus only on the domestic market, we need to appreciate the importance of the internationalization that is needed amongst our firms to be able to scale, to be able to grow their operations. Now, the Caribbean Development Bank, in the last research that I would have seen, would have estimated that MSMEs in the region contribute between 70 to 85% of the number of enterprises in our region. Not only that, but these firms contribute 60 to 70% to GDP across the Caribbean and account for approximately 50% of employment in the region. Now, these are significant numbers, and therefore it is important, we believe, for us to look at, well, what are some of those impediments to growth, impediments to development of this critical sector, and how can we address some of those impediments? So this is why we are here today, to help us to distill this topic and consider what are some of the strategies that we can employ to make sure we have a resilient sector able to contribute even further to the region's economic growth. So to help us this morning to kickstart our conversation. I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for today. With me is Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones, and she is a Bahamian national currently residing in Barbados. She's also spent over a decade in Kingston, Jamaica. And between 2013 and 2022, she worked at the Inter-American Development Bank, where she served as general manager of the Caribbean Group. Her purviews spanned IDB operations in Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and her home country of the Bahamas. She's currently the Vice President Acting of Operations of the Development Bank after 2022. She's an economist and has over 30 years experience in macroeconomics and economic development, with special on the Caribbean Monetary Fund in senior posts for over 20 years, both at a staff and board level. She holds a master's degree in economics. She's also an alumnus of the University of Toronto and the United World Colleges. Her publications include a book on Caribbean fiscal challenges. A member of the International Women's Forum, Mrs. Turner-Jones is passionate about financial inclusion, gender equity, children, and vulnerable communities and the environment. So, colleagues, with this background, you will appreciate that our speaker today is well capable to help us with this topic as we look at small business as a catalyzer for regional economic growth. So it is my pleasure at this time to introduce Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones to share with us in this first segment of our colloquium.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holder. That was a very generous introduction. Before I go there, I just want to welcome all of the regional participants and especially the Barbadian participants to this event this morning, which I think is really important. And just to thank you for keeping up this tradition of the Small Business Week in Barbados. Before I even start to speak, I want to thank the private sector division of the CDB for helping in today's preparation for this webinar. As I was in the shower this morning, I was thinking about the economist Ernst Schumacher, who wrote this book in 1973, and the title of the book was Small is Beautiful, and I think a lot of us may be familiar with that publication in 1973. Last year was there was a 50th anniversary, there was a 50th anniversary of the publication of that book. And what was so radical at the time when he wrote that book, and Schumacher was a statistician, economist. He was born in Germany, but he was actually a British citizen. At the time when he wrote that book, it was basically a challenge to the capitalist model, and his view was that we needed to put human beings back into the development model. So I want to preface today's conversation and my remarks by saying, when we think about small, usually we associate it with something negative, but I want to say that small in this sense can be very powerful, and let's not think as small as being an impediment, even though 90% of what I'm going to say has to do with impediments to the growth of the small business sector in our region for all of the factors we know already, but somehow we're not seeming to break through some of these challenges. So thank you for that introduction. And it really is a pleasure to be here and not only representing the bank, but talking about the role of small businesses as a catalyzer for economic growth in this region. And why it's important is because not only do we find that in the Caribbean, economic growth has been fairly anemic for a long period of time, and I want to say for probably the last 25 years, many countries in this region have struggled to grow above 3% per year in real terms. And part of the impetus of catalyzing the small business sector is to open up new economic opportunities. So that's my opening comment. So everybody who is listening in today understands how endowed the Caribbean is in many ways. Culture, landscape, vibrant economies, creative people, paradise, some would call it, in terms of a place to live. However, as mainly most countries in this region are small island development states, we know that these economies face significant challenges. Economic volatility, whether it's an external shock like the one we experienced through the pandemic, or in 2008 with the economic downturn globally, high unemployment rates, and of course, the dependence on tourism or agriculture, or now in some countries, oil and gas sectors. Yet within this challenge lies immense opportunity, and here is where small businesses come in. Dr. Holder mentioned that small businesses really are the backbone of our economies. They are the backbone of most economies around the world. And in our region, they account for about 90% of all the firms, and contributing more than 50% to GDP and well over 60% of all jobs, including, of course, women and young persons. And I think this is a very important point to stop and pause that across this region, because labor force participation rates for women tend to be lower than men. It's an important thing to always to be considering, because women are, I would say women are the backbone of Caribbean economies. But just bear that in mind as I'm speaking. Interestingly, research also indicates that investing in and empowering small and medium enterprises can significantly contribute to achieving 60% of the SDG targets. For those of you who are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, spoiler alert, our region is not on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. We have a long way to go. And that's mostly related to the fact that we need to do more investments in a lot of areas where the SDGs are focused, including digital literacy, access to water, gender equality, and so on. So the SDGs, as you know, are related to sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, building resilient infrastructure, and fostering innovation. So there we go. We are missing the mark on meeting those SDGs by 2030. So hence even more importance for this subject. It's really hard to imagine this region without small businesses, from their role in the tourism sector, which is a key economic driver in the region, to small manufacturers and small-scale farmers who contribute to much-needed food sovereignty and security. I was in Dominica last week because we were initiating the rehabilitation of a road from the East Coast to the West Coast in Dominica. Now, for those of you who know anything about Dominica, it's a very small country with extremely difficult topography. And so this road will link farmers and fisherfolk from one part of the island to markets in the center of, not in the center, but to the capital. And it's an important, it will be an important connectivity infrastructure work in order to make sure those small farmers and those fisherfolk have access to markets. So we're talking about a real change in livelihoods for 6,000 people in that particular community. I'm sure that everyone would agree that our economies need diversification beyond tourism and agriculture, and also recognize that small businesses have led this charge. And just think about all the dynamism that came out of the COVID period, but I'm going to get to that. Small businesses also bring agility to the marketplace and can innovate quickly to meet local demands. During the pandemic, this was evident as many small businesses pivoted to online sales or adapted their services to stay afloat. And let's think back to that period. We could order things online. We had deliveries at home. Even in Jamaica, where I was living at the time, the government did something I think was very innovative and I think life-changing for a lot of small businesses. They introduced a platform where even the pan chicken man And to those of you who live in Jamaica, or those who've been to Jamaica, know how significant the pan chicken man is. But even the pan chicken man, I could order food from the pan chicken man and have that food delivered to me, or he or she could get payments as a result of this platform. This kind of resilience and creativity is essential for long-term economic sustainability. As a trained economist, it would be remiss of me not to also emphasize that beyond economics, small businesses enrich our communities. They keep money circulating locally, support local suppliers, and contribute to community cohesion. A thriving local business scene creates vibrant neighborhoods, strengthens social bonds, and enhances our cultural identity. And again, I can't emphasize enough how small businesses in communities can really be not just a point of a marketplace, but also the aspect of social cohesion and bringing people together in a community. I think is really important. Another spoiler alert, a lot of what I'm going to say now goes back to what Lynette has been quoted saying this week in the press about the impediments to small businesses and what's wrong. We have been saying these same things for many years, and I'm hoping that at some point our policymakers and our financial institutions will begin to digest how complicated it is for small business, not just to access credit, but also to do business in this region. So let me just say that the next 3 minutes of what I'm going to say is going to focus on what are some of these impediments, especially access to finance, trade facilitation, transport and logistics, and the regulatory environment that affects small businesses. I don't think it's a secret. Lots of entrepreneurs struggle to find funding. Traditional banks often regard small businesses as high risk, which often leads to a cycle of undercapitalization, hindering growth potential. In fact, most small businesses are seeded by either loans from family members or informal markets. So an underdeveloped financial services industry with limited financing options is what the ecosystem currently looks like. Private sector lending typically focuses on corporates, big firms, consumers, car loans, and mortgages. You want to buy a house, it's very easy to get a mortgage from a bank. Alternative sources of financing for MSMEs are fairly limited. Asset-based lending, such as factoring, is underdeveloped and remains unrecognized in several jurisdictions in our region, especially in the Eastern Caribbean area. Digital payment and fintech infrastructure is still nascent across this region. We're not using digital payments enough. We're not, even the banks, financial institutions are not making fintech available for consumers, let alone people who want to run businesses. Platforms could offer significant financing and market opportunities for SMEs, but high fees, lack of interoperability across payment systems, and regulatory gaps have hindered their development. And this relates to e-commerce. Overall, there's little equity and risk capital available to early and growth stage MSMEs, which remain mostly self-financed, as I mentioned earlier. And here I want to just say share a story about Jamaica, because I think in Jamaica is where we see the ecosystem probably the most developed from early stage, meaning angel investors, equity financing, venture capital. There's more of a more mature ecosystem developing in a country like Jamaica. Jamaica is a large market with a lot of SMEs, but I think that model can be replicated elsewhere, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. Long-term funding is also constrained by shallow capital markets. We know that our capital markets in this region are very much focused again on the large firms and not on small entrants. Again, example of Jamaica, junior stock exchange has been really important in getting capital to new small entrants, and also that we can take lessons from the Jamaica Stock Exchange on the social impact investing angle, but more on that later. Underdeveloped credit infrastructure. Credit infrastructure is often missing or underdeveloped across this region. Few countries, and the exceptions being the Bahamas, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, actually even have credit information bureaus. Now, of course, one of the most important aspects of being able to access capital or lending from a bank is, what is your credit rating? So even for consumers, this can be, or just a regular borrower, this can be a challenge. But if you're a business, it's even more of a challenge. And I think that can be enhanced if we had better credit bureaus operating across the region. Only Jamaica, for example, has an electronic registry of movable collateral. Collateral requirements are very high because of the absence of a liquid secondary market for fixed assets, constraints to the auction prices for repossessed properties, and prudential regulation mandating coverage requirements for certain types of loans. Also, despite a recent push from the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, digital financial services, including digital payments, have not really taken off in earnest, with cash and checks still widely used. I think the Caribbean must be one of the last regions in the world where we still love to use cash. And for all manner of reasons, cash is a bad idea. According to a recent IFC study, most notably, the sand dollar, which I'm very proud to say is the digital currency in the Bahamas, is now contributing quite significantly to bringing MSMEs into the digital space. And I think Jamaica is following up with its own digital currency. I'm forgetting the name of the Jamaica central bank digital currency right now, but there's been a lot of sensitization around the use of digital currencies that are being issued by central banks. So we need to watch the space and think about it as a medium for having small businesses be able to do business more seamlessly and across, not just across the country, but across the region. Other related underlying issues include the high cost of finance, often double-digit interest rates, because banks will assess small businesses as more risky. And of course, the more risky comes in because if you're a new entrant, if you're a young business, you don't have the credit, you may not have audited financial statements, you may not have a long track record of operating the business, so the bank will assess you as being risky and you're going to pay dearly as a result. Not just high interest rates, but also high collateral requirements and high levels of informality in the sector overall. So another important piece of this is, can small businesses access markets, and what are some of the impediments to accessing markets? Competing globally can be overwhelming for small businesses. By the way, not just for small businesses, most businesses in the Caribbean have difficulty competing globally. But small businesses especially need support to reach broader markets, both regionally and internationally. However, MSMEs in the region are mostly domestically owned, and they lack strong links with the international economy that could provide the potential for positive spillovers. With little or no trade, they fail to expand production, access new technologies, and immerse themselves in the digital space. This can be addressed through the availability and access to increased market intelligence to enable better understanding of market trends, demands, distribution, and the global value chain for their products or services. Access to affordable quality infrastructure to effect standards and certification remains a constraint. And of course, these are areas I think where a lot of regional institutions are working, including CDB. On the issue of logistics and connectivity, and here is this area needs some special attention because there's limited accessibility. Many islands have inadequate transportation networks, making it difficult for small businesses to transport goods efficiently. This can lead to delays and increased costs. In a country like Jamaica, for example, bringing agricultural produce from rural communities into Kingston, where the main markets are. I mean, you see these trucks on the weekend, traveling across highways into Kingston. And that's expensive. It's expensive for the farmers. It's expensive for the consumers. It adds to costs. High shipping costs. The cost of shipping goods between the islands can be prohibitive, affecting pricing and profit margins for small businesses reliant on imports or exports. Dependence on external suppliers. Many small businesses rely on imported goods, which can create vulnerabilities in the supply chain, especially during global disruptions. We're living through one of those periods right now, given what's happening with disruptions because of Ukraine, because of what's happening in the Middle East, and so on. Inventory management issues. Inconsistent supply can lead to stockouts or overstock situations, complicating inventory management for small enterprises. There are ways to address this, more use of technology and so on, but that can be an issue. Limited internet access. While urban areas may have good internet connectivity, rural regions often lack reliable service, which can restrict e-commerce opportunities for small businesses. So thinking about the last mile client, how can we make sure that our fiber network reaches all parts of the island, so that folks who live in rural communities can have access to e-commerce. Digital literacy. Many small businesses may lack the skills or knowledge to effectively utilize digital tools for marketing, sales, and operations. Despite the fact that we have high cell phone penetration, having a phone and having digital literacy are two different things. So I think we need to do a lot more work there. High freight costs. Small businesses often face disproportionately high freight costs due to lower shipment volumes, making it difficult to compete with larger firms that can negotiate better rates. We've heard this across this region. A container coming in from, whether it's coming in from Miami or wherever it's coming from, landing in one destination, but leaving the destination pretty much empty. If you are a small producer, it's very difficult for you to have access to shipping costs that are affordable, because you may have to actually be bearing the cost of that whole container versus just a space in the container. Lack of local logistics providers. Limited options for local logistics services can hinder small businesses from accessing efficient delivery solutions. I want to now turn to the regulatory hurdles that small businesses face. And again, this is more a reminder of work that needs to be done across the region. The bureaucratic landscape can be daunting and often serve as a deterrent to aspiring entrepreneurs. Small businesses often face complex regulations that can be overwhelming and costly, which can also divert resources away from core operations. Navigating customs regulations can be challenging, especially for small businesses without dedicated resources or expertise. This can result in delays and added costs. Our regulatory frameworks tend to be inconsistent. Variability in regulations across countries in this region can also complicate cross-border trade for small businesses. And by the way, again, not just for small businesses, it also applies for large businesses in our region because of differential regulatory environments, whether it's in capital markets or in how we do business, how to register business. All of that adds to hindrances for small businesses. Then there are other issues, including the rising cost of doing business. There's crime, increases in labor costs, labor shortages, skill shortages, access to technology, access to and the ability to collect and analyze data, access to specific capacity building training, mentors, and access to and cost of inputs. We talk about these issues and these challenges a lot. We need to come up with solutions, and I'm going to get to some of those in a second. So what are some of the strategies for empowering small businesses? I think the first one, which is top of mind, of course, is access to finance. Governments and financial institutions should develop innovative funding solutions tailored for small businesses. I gave the example of Jamaica and the ecosystem there. That ecosystem can be replicated. And by the way, there are institutions like CDB and IDB and others who are trying to work on this. So that microloans, crowdfunding platforms, public-private partnerships can provide the necessary capital for growth. Innovative instruments to enhance access to green finance, especially for MSMEs, as well as de-risking and credit enhancement tools to crowd in the private sector are also critical. Green or blue bonds, which offer access to a wider pool of institutional investors while benefiting from slightly lower interest rates than conventional bonds, are proving attractive for many countries. The promotion of intra-regional trade, I think perhaps Caribbean is one of the most underperforming regions in terms of interregional trade. And we know, again, all of those things I said earlier, but also the fact that, only about 9% of our total exports are actually interregional. That is an extremely small number for a region that has as an objective regional integration. I think I don't need to say any more about that. Market intelligence, provision of a mechanism for collection, analysis, and dissemination of data on sectors, products, services, and markets, addressing the value chain, and the greater use of AI, for example, artificial intelligence for MSME development and expansion is now urgently needed. And I think AI sounds scary when we mention it, and I know we've been hearing it every minute of the day for the last, I don't know, many years, but artificial intelligence, we have been using, artificial intelligence has been embedded in a lot of what we do already. And what we need to do is now harness ways to use it to our advantage, either to scale our information, to make better use of analytics, market information. And I think it'll be particularly helpful for small businesses. And here, one of the, just as an aside, sometimes when we're analyzing proposals for small businesses, the piece that's really missing in the equation is always the market intelligence. Have you done a demand study? Do you know how many of these goods you can sell? Does anybody want these goods you're trying to sell? And I think that's part of the education we need to help small businesses to do the right sort of market analysis before actually investing in a particular business. Streamlining regulations. Again, we need to advocate for policies that simplify the business registration process. Typically filling out forms may have been the way to go, but today these things ought to be done very efficiently by using the internet and having digital platforms that governments can establish to make sure that when somebody wants to open up a business, it's easy to do. It's filling out a form online. It's having all of the necessary licenses, whatever the requirements are, in one place so that small business owners can do whatever needs to be done in a seamless way as possible. That's the only way to incentivize small business owners to actually move from the informal part of the market to the formal part of the market, because that's actually the goal at the end of the day. We don't want small businesses operating in an informal sector outside of the tax net. And here, I'm also speaking to finance officials, because the more we can mainstream everyone doing business across this region, the better off I think our fiscal positions can be at the end. More revenue can be collected. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is to make sure small businesses can be working legitimately and that they can do that in as easy a way as possible. I mentioned the importance of credit bureaus and being able to assess whether a client is creditworthy or not. So here I want to put in a plug for the ECCU, because they're also in the process of developing a regional credit bureau. Again, enhancing education and training. I can't emphasize this enough. Investing in entrepreneurship is crucial. It's not enough to just have an idea. One has to know how to run a business. One has to know how to read a balance sheet, differentiate between a liability and an asset, be able to understand what it's going to take to make your business successful and how to do that. And I think education and training is very, very important to build up skills as well as confidence. Building networks and collaborations. We know that our whole world runs on networks. And for small business people, networks are extremely important, not just to collaborate, but also to share knowledge. And in this regard, I think regional business incubators and any incubators that's helping to bring small business people together is an important part of the ecosystem that we need to support. It'll also help with nurturing innovation and community support for small businesses. This is a very important point, promoting local products. Encouraging consumers to buy local can have a transformative impact. And here again, I'm thinking about Schumacher and his putting people at the center of economic development, and having a sustainable way of operating and driving development in our economies. Absolutely supporting local products, and there are lots of ways to do this, whether using anchor firms like the bigger firms, whether it's Answer McCall or whether it's Grace Kennedy, making sure that the supply chain of the goods that the Grace Kennedy or Answer McCall, Massey Group, what they need to outfit their operations, that they are tied into local businesses. And here, especially when we talk about food security, when we talk about helping our local farmers get those products to market, here it's very important that we have a strong, not just campaign, but we have a way of supporting local products in any given economy. So finally, and this is where the rubber hits the road for the CDB, what are we doing, and what are we, who are we working with to help support small businesses? And I want to say that this is a topic that is extremely close to my heart, in that the CDB traditionally has been an organization that has focused most of its lending on the sovereign side. I think most of you who are listening into this, participating in this webinar, know that CDB lends to governments primarily for infrastructure, for social development, for energy, renewable energy, energy transition. A small, very small part of CDB's portfolio is dedicated to the private sector. We are looking to address that imbalance in terms of how we lend by not just developing the private sector arm of the CDB, but also by thinking through how we're going to provide more access to finance for the private sector in the region. But just by way of some numbers, between 2020 and 2023, especially working with all of the national development financial institutions, including the likes of DBJ, the GFC in Belize, Development Bank in the Bahamas and Barbados, for example, we have lent over $29 million to about 800 MSMEs across this region. So it's not trivial, and it's an important part of our private sector strategy to work on the enabling environment, what is needed to make the private sector more attractive in our region, but also how can we drive more resources to parts of the economy that need it. On capacity building, the bank offers technical assistance and training programs to enhance skills and capabilities of small business owners through 3 key programs: the Caribbean Technical Cooperation Initiative, the Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund, and I think a lot of you have heard about this, the Caribbean Regional She Trades Hub. Almost every day when you open up LinkedIn, you will see something on what we're doing with She Trades in partnership with the International Trade Center. Again, very proud of that, especially as it's dedicated primarily at women, business owners, and entrepreneurs. We are supporting entrepreneurship through initiatives that promote innovation and business development, including partnerships with local organizations to foster startup ecosystems that I mentioned earlier. We've worked with Tech Beach, which is an outfit out of Jamaica, which hosts on an annual basis an event that is promoting innovation with small business owners and emerging entrepreneurs, and the OECS Competitiveness Business Council. Investment in infrastructure is very important, whether it's new forms of electricity, water solutions, but technology and business facilities that will help drive a more conducive environment for small businesses to thrive is very important. Regional networking, the CDB facilitates networking opportunities among small business owners, encouraging collaboration and knowledge sharing, which can lead to new partnerships and market opportunities. Again, working with our IDB partners, Complete Caribbean, and CDB's She Talks, She Trades, and also our initiatives on the creative sector. These are some good examples. In terms of policy advocacy, I see this as a very important role. The bank engages with all of the governments we're working with to make sure that their policies are conducive and supportive, that the regulatory environment is one that's going to make it easy, talking about all those things I mentioned earlier, for small businesses to thrive. We're working with ECCB and the Barbadian government on 2 interventions right now to support the establishment of collateral registries, for example. So these initiatives collectively aim to strengthen the small business sector, enhance economic resilience, and promote sustainable growth across the region. Back to my Schumacher, small is beautiful, where I started at the beginning. When Schumacher wrote that book, as I mentioned earlier, the notion of a green economy was not popular at the time in 1973. But 50 years later, we're all talking about the green economy, green initiatives, sustainable development, SDGs. And in this sense, I think we're right. We're hitting where we need to be hitting in terms of messaging around what needs to be done for small businesses. Our partnerships include a whole range of stakeholders, not just the ones I mentioned, not just IDB, but public and private sector, other MDBs, civil society, academia, UE, for example, financial institutions, business support organizations like the Small Business Association of Barbados, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and so on, and of course, the small businesses themselves. We will continue to participate along with other regional partners. We have governments of UK and Canada and the IDB with the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility. That's really important. Compete Caribbean has been extremely instrumental in helping improve the business climate in this region, not just at a national level, but also at a regional level. Activities have ranged from strengthening intellectual property ecosystems, Exhibit Jamaica, supporting the enabling environment for the development of the blue economy in the OECS, Trinidad, Belize, and Barbados, to facilitating the development of digital technologies to improve the business environment, example in Suriname. CDB is also partnering on the recently launched Carib Equity Fund, and I think this one is very exciting, and it is particularly pitched at young, new, innovative investors, startups. Similarly, the current and second round of the standby facility financed by the 11th European Development Fund to the tune of around 9 million euros to tailor 27 interventions aimed not only to improve the trade dynamics of the region, but also small business development. Funded activities under that program include market intelligence, strengthening the capacity of business support organizations that I mentioned to provide relevant export development support to MSMEs, and thereby enabling them eventually to participate and benefit from the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement. And here I want to say, we sign agreements across this region to help trade, to move trade from the Caribbean outside. We need to really support the businesses that are going to benefit from these agreements. It's no point signing agreements and not having, and I think Dr. Holder made this comment earlier, that we're signing lots of agreements, but we're not really doing the work to make sure we can benefit from these agreements. And I'm very much supportive of that. And on this note, with the CARIFORUM EPA, we have also launched programs aimed at reducing export and import time, simplifying documentation, for example, in Barbados. Efforts are underway to establish a port community system, again, back to the whole hurdles around logistics, so that will translate into faster custom clearance for farmers, faster approval of clearance certificates for quarantine agriculture. It also helped to reduce the access cost to information. The lower the cost of communication and improve record keeping, as errors and data inconsistencies often lead to delay in custom clearance. I have said a lot, and I'm hoping that this will open up lines of discussion for the panel and also for the audience to ask relevant questions. It really is a privilege to be able to present to you this morning, and I'm hoping that beyond just talking about these hurdles and beyond mentioning what are some of the approaches that we can take to overcome these hurdles, we start to see the benefits of the work that we're doing in this area. And I wish everyone who has a small business, women, men, young people, everyone in this region, that we can start to realize what Schumacher was mentioning in 1973, that small is beautiful. We put people at the center of development and things will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for what I must conclude has been a very comprehensive presentation on the state of the MSME sector in the region, if you will, and what are some of the possible solutions to help us address some of the issues. Colleagues, you heard in the presentation that there are still several impediments to MSME development and growth, not least of which have been the rising cost of doing business, access to finance. We've been talking about that in our association and across the region for some time, access to markets. We're very hopeful that we can make some serious inroads with the CSME, for example. I mean, that has been put forward as a platform or regime to help our MSMEs, to trade goods and services across the region. We heard about transportation and connectivity, and you're talking about internationalizing your business, moving within the region, but we have transportation as a serious impediment, and it was mentioned in the presentation, the whole digital revolution and the fact that too many of our firms have not yet adopted digital solutions and digital platforms as a key part of their business models. And the regulatory regime, the regulatory environment, which if it is not enabling, it can inhibit the development of small firms. And in our region, a fifth point was mentioned, now it's crime. The impact now of crime on our social fabric and by extension, our economic potential and economic development. And then the sixth point, access to quality business development services. And we, drawing on the Babson College models, we know that supports from business support organizations like the SBA and so many others across the region is key and critical in ensuring that small firms can access the capacity building tools to help grow their businesses. I believe, colleagues, this morning that our keynote speaker has really set the platform for our panelists now to come and help us to really weigh in on these points and drill down even further. So I'm going to ask you, please, gather your thoughts, post your questions in the chat feature on this platform, and for sure, our speakers will address these. We want to thank sincerely Mrs. Turner-Jones for coming on and sharing with us and delivering this keynote address that, as I said, sought to really look at this topic of small business as a catalyzer for regional economic growth, or what are some of the issues that we need to address, what the Caribbean Development Bank is doing as our regional partner, development partner, to help in this vein, and overall what is required for growth in the future. So we thank you so much, Mrs. Turner-Jones, for your presentation, and we're going to segue now nicely into our panel discussion and invite our panelists to continue the conversation. Let me at this time share with you once again that this event today is a part of Small Business Week 2024, being hosted by the Small Business Association of Barbados. And this week of activities has been organized now for 21 consecutive years to help us with our advocacy and our educational and development work here in Barbados. And those of you on the call from across the region, we invite you to collaborate with the association in your own countries on programs and policies that will help with the development of the region's small business sector. We look forward to the collaborations and partnerships that will emerge even from this session today. Small Business Week is sponsored by Flow Business. Flow Business is our title sponsor, and we're going to hear from them a little later on, and some of the other sponsors. We have to give them an opportunity also to promote their goods and services on this platform. So you can look out for that. Let's segue now into our panel, and let's get our colleagues to present for us. Now, before I do so, there are two questions. I'm hoping that Mrs. Turner-Jones, if you are able to maybe address one or two of the questions that have come from our audience based on your presentation. I'll looking at them, I'll recall at least one of them at this time, and then we'll get to our panel. I'm seeing here a question from Robert Homer asking how effective has the junior stock market in Jamaica been in the development of the small business sector in that country, and what can we do in Barbados to further develop our own junior stock exchange? So, Mrs. Turner-Jones, are you able to give your thoughts and weigh in on this particular question for us?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. I think it's been very effective. Not only because we've witnessed firms move from the junior stock exchange onto the main stock exchange, but I think it really provided the capital at the time that was needed for those particular firms. So there's a lot to be learned from that example. I mean, they didn't get it right all at the beginning, but I think eventually, and now that it's matured, it's definitely seen as adding a crucial part of it's an important part of the ecosystem in getting capital into the hands of businesses that need it at that particular stage of their development. I think what we have to be careful of with something like a junior stock exchange is monitoring, because a junior stock exchange by definition is giving you an advantage, whether it's a tax advantage or it's giving you access to capital at some lower rate of interest. But at some point, what needs to be monitored is how those firms actually exit the junior stock exchange and then graduate to the primary stock exchange. So if there are any issues, it's around that. I'm hoping that maybe there's someone who may be listening in from Jamaica who may be to add in their views, but I think from where I sit and what I observe over the 10 years, not just living, but also working in Jamaica on these issues, I think it's been an important part of securing financing for that part of the market. So I think super successful. And by the way, I think
yeah, Chair, can I add?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So good morning. Because that's something I track a lot as part of my academic career, and I would say the Jamaica Stock Exchange in general and the junior market that has been a spectacular example of regional success. This is a very sophisticated market right in our space. They've actually been, I think, in the last 15 years, at least 2 years, where the Jamaica Stock Exchange, as assessed by Bloomberg, was the top performing market. And specifically on the junior market, it's provided a fantastic mechanism for quite a range of businesses to access capital and to scale up. So if you think of the Barbados context, one of the most common small businesses are teachers and persons giving lessons. That's a common area of entrepreneur. And if you go on the junior stock market, we've seen cases where companies that really, in essence, offer lessons have been able to scale up. So you have One-on-One Educational Services Limited that's very much a tuition service around CSEC and others that has been really been able to build itself up. And a second company, EduFocal, and again, they are really in the tutoring, teaching business, and there are tons of people around Barbados and the Caribbean who are offering these services. And so I think that market has been a spectacular example of what can happen in the small business space.
Thank you very much, Professor Robinson, for that intervention. By way of update to the person who posed the question, I will share that in 2019, actually coming out of the Small Business Association's State of the Sector Conference, which was a part of the Small Business Week for that year, the SBA collaborated with the Barbados Stock Exchange to develop a project that will allow us here in Barbados to launch a junior market. I am very pleased to inform the audience that this project is funded in part by the Caribbean Development Bank. And Mrs. Turner-Jones, we're very pleased and thank you for the financial support and other technical support being provided by the CDB to ensure that Barbados can have a junior market. And I'll also share with the audience that a key part of the development of this project is actually modeling what is being done in Jamaica, because we agree that Jamaica has been a success story relative to their junior market and the ability to bring equity financing to the MSME sector there. So that is really by way of update. Let's segue into our discussion, because I see the questions are coming in and Professor Robinson already started the conversation. So by way of introduction, for the audience on the call, Professor Justin Robinson is Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. He's the principal of the Five Islands campus, a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He is an economist by profession, and he has more than 20 years with the University of the West Indies, having served as head of the Department of Management Studies, Cape Hill campus, executive director of the Sagicor Cape Hill School of Business and Management, dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, a board member for the undergraduate study section. He's also a member which he now heads as principal. So we're very pleased to have Professor Robinson on the call with us this morning, and let us invite you at this time to share your presentation. Following on from our keynote discussion, we've invited Professor Robinson to help us understand at least the economic policy space and what is needed across the region for us to make sure that we have an enabling environment that MSMEs can indeed make that contribution to overall economic growth. So let us welcome at this time Professor Justin Robinson, and please, as I said, kindly go ahead and place your questions in the chat that we can address as we enter into the second phase now of our colloquium to have our discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lynette, and good morning to the other panelists. Hi, Therese. It's been a long time. I don't know how good old Dennis is doing.
Thank you. We're all good. Thank you, Justin.
Okay. So I'm actually going to speak really 2 or 3 slides. That's what I'm just going to do, because I don't want to go back over a lot of what Therese has said and what you also have alluded to. And really, because I think a lot of the issues, the challenges in the space, they are very well known, the opportunities, the importance. And I really just want to focus the time I have on really 2 points. I have this sense that Okay, so while we do our lobbying, our advocacy for the importance of the small business sector and the challenges and so on, I think that's critical and that's important. But I really want to focus on two issues, which I think is maybe even a little more micro, but although some policy issues really target the sector. And I want to speak about the opportunity as I see with digitization and artificial intelligence. And what I see digitization and especially AI doing and really presenting, I think, a potential game changer at the policy level, as well as at the level of the businesses themselves, is that what they really do is you have wide access to high-powered productivity tools. What this digitization and especially the AI, I think where they can be game changers at the policy level and at the level of your particular firms is you now have wide access. The democratization really of a lot of productivity tools and skills. So digitization, I think digitization is from a policy level, I would want to encourage our policymakers to digitize a lot of the compliance processes around small businesses and the business sector generally, because the cost of compliance tends to be relatively high for small businesses compared to large businesses, just by the arithmetic. Okay, compliance is not really designed by scale. So a lot of the compliance requirements for a large business are the same as for a small business. So therefore, the cost is much more impactful. I think digitization, I think a major policy thrust in digitization would be to simplify things like business registration, tax compliance, paying fees, etc. That digitization of services and compliance requirements at the level of policy, I think is one very impactful thing that policymakers can do to boost the SME sector. For a small business person having to leave their office or move from their business or send a staff member to physically go to a government location to fill some forms, to do some aspect of compliance, to make a payment. That impact is just a lot greater on an SME than a larger type of firm. So I see digitization of services, compliance as really one of the key things that can be done at the economic and government policy level to really empower and reduce some of the constraints for SMEs. Again, there are a number of services, a number of initiatives offered around SMEs. Again, these can be digitized. And from the business side, digitization can help you overcome the challenges of small size, overcoming logistical challenges, and so on. So a number of international players are offering financing packages, initiatives around digitization. So I see that as a critical aspect. And then particularly with the AI, digitization and the AI in particular, I think offers tremendous potential to boost the productivity of a small business. And I guess because I was Pro-Vice Chancellor for the undergraduate studies at the time when ChatGPT came out, and there were a lot of concerns around it in education, I was forced, because I had to deal with it at the policy level for the entire university, I was forced to engage with that tool in a way I wouldn't have. And what I want to encourage for small businesses is there should be no need for any AI guild, ChatGPT guild, or anything like that. So in terms of your writing reports, a tool like Grammarly can tremendously boost your productivity and reduce the amount of time you spend making sure you get your communication right. Because clearly what written communication you send out from your firm reflects on your firm, and you want it to look a certain quality. You're responding to emails and so on. But AI tools like Grammarly and these other types of things, I don't think there should be any guilt around those things. Because one feature of being human is that we create tools. Humans create tools to boost their productivity. That's been true of us through history, and that separates us from other species. But again, that can reduce the amount of time and resources that a small business puts into these types of activities. ChatGPT itself, having really had to engage ChatGPT in depth, one of the things I came away with is that ChatGPT puts at the hands of the ordinary citizen almost your own personal computer program. As an academic economist engaging in publishing and so on, I've had to spend a lot of time learning how to program. But ChatGPT does simple programming very, very well. Let's say your business is growing and you have to do things like job evaluations. What these tools can give you very quickly, they can't do it for you perfectly, but you can get a template that you can then improve. Or even better with some of these tools, when you prepare like a job evaluation or some bid you are doing on a contract, you have prepared it, you put it into the tool and you upload it to say ChatGPT and you ask it to review and suggest improvements and so on. So I would encourage at the level of your businesses that you embrace these modern productivity tools, because what ChatGPT and a number of the AI applications out there, they put high-powered productivity tools in the hands of ordinary people. And I think that's a game changer potentially for SMEs who are already operating quite often with limited human and financial resources. And piggying back a lot on what Therese said, the financing challenge is really well known. I'm more familiar with the Barbados OECS space. And what I want to put out there to you is that this shortage of risk capital and the presence of shallow capital markets locally is a reality that is really not going to disappear that easily and is amplified in a small market. So one of the big challenges is that when I see the shortage of risk capital, and even financing targeted at SMEs is often debt financing, which comes with its own issues. There's very little equity, very little venture capital. So sort of risk capital, commercial banks, credit unions, insurance companies, they're only ever going to take so much risk. Providing risk capital is really not their niche in the financial sector. Institutions specializing in risk capital may face unique challenges in a small space. And what I want to encourage the SME sector and our policymakers is to, at the policy level, to seek to reduce the impediments, if any, to our firms seeking regional and international capital, and also a mindset among the SME sector that you want to, as you look for this risk capital, that you want to adopt a more regional and international approach, as the local amounts may be limited. One activity that I take part in is that there's Carry Chris, which is a regional credit rating agency, and I chair that ratings committee. And one of the things that has jumped out to me is that there are a growing number of financing entities entities like Cygnus out of Jamaica come to mind that are specializing in providing some of this risk capital. We talked about the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Again, you know, that has been their junior market has been an example of what can happen in the SME sector. And I sort of want to encourage our firms locally to take this more regional and international approach in accessing capital. At the UWI, we were seeking funding to launch an online school with focusing on the sustainable development goals. And we were able to attract some international venture capital funding from a global education fund called Blue Like an Orange that really is looking for projects like that around the globe. So I think the financing challenge is going to remain very problematic if you take a local approach to it because of our small markets. So I really want to encourage a regional and international approach. So again, in my very brief presentation, I want to emphasize those 2 points, again, to try to avoid rehashing a lot of ground that has been gone over before. One, that promise of digitization and AI, which I see which I see have the effect of putting some very high-powered productivity tools in the hands of small and medium-sized enterprises, and in dealing with the issue of risk capital to take a more regional international approach. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Robinson, for giving your overview. Looking at the questions from our participants, I have at least one I want Ms. Turner-Jones to consider, and then there's several, Professor Robinson, that I believe may very well be posed based on the presentation that you made just now. So the first one I see here is there a plan to improve the ease of doing business in the Caribbean to be in the top 50, maybe top 50 countries by 2026? Turner-Jones, your thoughts?
That's a really good question. So remember, we used to benchmark when the World Bank had the doing business indicators. Remember that whole brouhaha, and they had to change the methodology. World Bank is coming up with a new metric. I think they're calling it the Be Ready or something like this. I don't think it's launched yet. But the point is, we weren't ever ranking very high. I think Barbados used to be maybe in the top 50. Surprisingly, Jamaica was not ranked very high. Even my own country, the Bahamas, we were not where I thought we should be on this index. But a lot of it has to do with some of the things that Justin just mentioned. So if you look at the countries that typically rank in like top 10, these are countries that are doing really well on digital transformation. A country like Estonia, where at one point in my life, I managed to take 6 countries to Estonia to see exactly what a country that's running on a digital platform and where everything is now digitized, what that looks like, what that feels like, how you can do work differently. We walked into the cabinet office, for example, and there are only laptops on the desk, not a single piece of paper. In Estonia, there's no paper anywhere. Everything is done electronically. In Estonia, you can, I think the only thing you have to present yourself, and I want to get this right, there's one thing you have to present yourself in person to do. It may be, I don't know, maybe getting married, but there's so many. You can vote online, you can pay your taxes online, you can register your business online. In 18 minutes in Estonia, you can register your business, have the memorandum of understanding come up at the same time as you're doing this registration, open up a bank account for that business in one transaction, 18 minutes. So their view of life is, it's The bureaucracy is not where we want to have you spend your time. We want you to be running your business. So you do the so in other words, you can fill out the stuff online. Once you're registered, then the authorities can come behind you and say, well, do you have this, do you have da. But what they're focused on is that Therese can open her business when she wants to open her business. Not that you have to run from, as Justin was saying, one spot over here to pay the registration fee, go over there to do something else. And we've all experienced that. The IDB did a very nice paper once on for all of Latin America, and did a special one on the Caribbean on how much time it takes to do transactions in the region. And I must say, the country that came out worse was Jamaica. On average, and things have changed since the study was done, but not really, not much. On average, it takes 8 visits to public agencies to do business, to transact businesses in Jamaica. And I don't want to bore you, but there are experiences that I've had where you go today and you ask for these forms and you fill out those forms and you hand them over. No, can you bring this tomorrow? And by the way, when you bring it tomorrow, now can you go to NCB and pay for the fee and then come back to me and bring me the receipt, and then next week you come and pick it up? Okay, so that's just an example of how frustrating, and I don't run a business. I was just doing a civil procedure. But for people who are running businesses, who has time to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 places to get things done? So I think I'm deviating a little bit on this doing business, but the point is we have to use technology to reduce the transaction time of business people from running here to there. And I think the best example in the world is Estonia. And as I said, 6 countries in this region have already been exposed to that model. They know it needs to be done. We need the digital ID. Barbados has done it. Bahamas has done it. Trinidad is doing it. Guyana is doing it. We need not just have the digital ID like Barbados does. That digital ID is supposed to unlock services. You should be able to use that digital ID to go online, pay your taxes, apply for a driver's license, get your passport online, do any manner of business. In Estonia, for example, you can log into, in real time, your children's classroom to see what's happening, see the grades of your child in real time, send a message to the teacher. But to get there, we have to do a lot of work on the back end. So I know when people think about digital technology replacing human beings, it's not really replacing human beings. It's just replacing the interface between the customer and what you need. Like, I don't really need to talk to a person to renew my driver's license. I can do that online. I should be able to do that online, as I can do in the Bahamas now. And I must say, kudos to the Bahamas. They have gone very far in getting a passport, a driver's license, all those things really were very simple. You just go to the office next day and pick it up. And the same should happen in Barbados. But the point is, the people behind the scenes to do the back office work will still have jobs to do. We're not replacing jobs. We're just making it efficient to run the business, do the operation, reduce the transaction cost, reduce the time in line so that productivity across the country can improve. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? Because Justin will tell you, and any economist will tell you, the only way to grow our economies is to improve productivity. And productivity sucks come when we have to stand in line, go through traffic, and do all these things face to face with people who really, they'd rather not be dealing with us anyway. They'd rather be doing something else. And that's what they should be doing. So I think to answer the question about can we get to the top on this, we have a long way to go, because it also involves a change in how we view customer service, public servants, putting back the service in that, but also taking pride in being able to do things efficiently, reducing the costs, freeing up time to get on with the business and not with the bureaucracy.
Yeah,
Thanks.
well said. Thank you so much. So we're in essence talking about a cultural shift, a cultural change and how we do business. And as I listen to you, the point that comes to mind, which I don't know that we all really have an appreciation for, is that these things, these impediments, make doing business very costly. There's a significant cost, and this is why our region is considered to, be so expensive, so costly to do business. All of these layers, all of these processes, add layers of cost to the business, into the operation. And if it is that we can really get our leaders to appreciate that, and then, put that enabling framework in place to address these processes, I think we can begin to touch on, what is really needed to reduce the high cost of business in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one last thing on this, we're small. We're very small economies. We're very small society, small labor force. Skills are short. And the only way to bridge that gap is to use technology. Just look around the world. The countries that are doing well are the countries that have embraced technology use and are making it easier to do business. I can't emphasize that enough, Lynette. And I don't know what else. I mean, I think from a CDB perspective, we are pushing digital solutions everywhere, but it really also has to be driven by citizens saying, we want you to deliver the service better and differently, right? So citizens, I think there is power in advocating for these changes. And even the workers. I mean, if you go to, I don't want to pick on any agency here, but let's just take the driving authority, licensing authority. There are people patiently sitting there under the tent, doing this and wasting time. And I think if all of that can be done remotely, electronically, everybody's lives would be improved. Children can get to school, parents can go to work, the workers can actually be doing things that they enjoy doing and not having to spend so much time dealing with the public. So I think there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot there, and we can replicate this across sectors. It's not just certain services. Think about health records, right? Most of our health records are on paper in our doctor's offices or at hospitals. The way medicine is going, we need electronic health records. We need privacy. And those records are not safe where they are currently. And I think you can, and same with educational records. How difficult is it to get data on how our kids are doing from primary school straight through to high school? Do we have a way of tracking those kids because there's an electronic record that's accompanying every student? I don't think there's any country in this region that's doing that, but in Estonia they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks again. So the takeaway from this is that we need to look at the use of technology to improve productivity and reduce the high cost of doing business. So if it's one thing that I believe we can maybe add to our things to do list following this week of activities, is this point, to engage all of our policymakers, all of our key stakeholders to look at improving the use of technology in business. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to Professor Robinson. You talked a lot about AI, and there's a question here about this point, considering the potential of AI. Because you think many of these firms have that maybe holding them back from embracing AI.
I think you broke up a bit there, Lynette. I didn't hear the tail end of what you said.
Yes, we want to use technology of the actual connectivity. So let's see if Professor is back with us at this time to address
I'm
the
hearing
question.
and
Are you
seeing
there
you,
now,
Lynette.
Professor?
You broke up a bit there, so I lost a bit of what you said.
Right. Okay. And the fact businesses still appear to be, hesitant in using AI, adopting AI in their firms. So, all right, we've lost Professor Robinson. So I'm not sure if Ms. Turner-Jones, if you want to weigh in on that question before we get to Chuka. Okay, he's back with us. He's back with us now. We can see that you're here, Professor. Did you hear the question?
Can you repeat? I think I missed some of it.
Yes. Okay. The question is about AI, because you spoke to AI quite a bit in your presentation. And one of our participants is querying, why do you think that small firms are still very hesitant in adopting AI in their operations? Or what advice can you give?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So in the space that I operate in, one of the things that I observe is that there seems to be a lot of AI guilt. There is a stigma associated with some of these tools that if you use ChatGPT, then somehow you are cheating, you're not doing your own work and areas like that. So one of the things I see is a bit of guilt. And I think persons need to overcome some of that. So to take someone like myself, Lynette, I mean, I was a good researcher, I got promoted. Now I am managing people. Now suddenly I have to write a set of job evaluations. That's certainly not my distinctive competence. I really want to be thinking about new, exciting research, new ways of reaching. So if there is a tool that can reduce the time I take to do job evaluations by half, then I don't think there should be any guilt around embracing that. You know, you are a small business, you have a skill that you started and you're running your business, and CDB is offering this facility, but you have to prepare a fairly detailed proposal to get into the game. Now, that's not your competence. You may spend a lot of time doing that, or you may have to hire a consultant or someone like that. Again, if we have modern tools that can reduce that time significantly, then I think people need to get over that guilt, because these tools are widely available. And the main impediment I see in the spaces that I operate in is that there's still some stigma around.
Okay. Rather interesting. The issue of guilt. The issue of guilt. That's a rather interesting observation. I think Belando's follow-up question maybe will help us to further look at this issue of technology, because he's asking about e-commerce and e-commerce gateways for the private sector in the region. What is the state of play even, and how can we improve this, that more of our firms can go even outside the region and internationalize their operations? You're muted.
Yeah, so that certainly remains a bugbear in our space. One of these failures, I think, at the policy level, because getting up an e-commerce site is not especially challenging. The blockage has always been on the financial side, sort of facilities in terms of the payments. Can you get the payments platform and get those payments done? And so again, in my presentation, when I talk about what are some of the things that policymakers can do, and I guess because I've been in this public policy advocacy space for a long time, I find myself trying to think, what are one or two big things that can be done? Are there one or two things? Because we tend to see, you get national budgets, you get proposal, and there are a million and one things, a new fund. But on that digital side and enacting the policies to facilitate payments so that we can get e-commerce, I think that would be one big thing that would really make a dramatic change in the small business space. We see some improvements. I mean, when I look at First Caribbean, I think they have a facility called First Pay, which facilitates very small payments. I mean, My kids get me to use it to pay their little hairdressers and other things for the small amount. So I think there's certainly progress there. And we don't have to wait for that one big bang solution. Huh? The commercial banks with all their challenges are pushing us to have online payments. The developments means that debit cards are now effectively credit cards and can be used for those payments. So it's really, there is change needed at the policy level to really reduce the cost of accessing this. And I think that's one of two, three things that would make a huge difference in the space. But also have a mindset to use what is there now. How can I operate within the space to digitize my business?
Okay, so let's say one final query at this time, and then we'll go to our next presentation. And this has to do with supply chain management, Professor. Is a good question here on the issue of small firms better managing the supply chains to reduce the carbon footprint, as you could appreciate, the issues of climate change and the like. So what are your thoughts on this? And maybe segue into a query I'm seeing here from Anne Marie about promising global markets for the small business sector. How to access some of these I guess marketing strategies, what effective marketing strategies can be considered in light of consumer behaviors and the difference in consumer behaviors. If we can maybe take these two final queries in this segment before we get to the next presentation. You're muted.
So if I take the second and sort of work back,
yes,
I always think of market opportunities as arising from solving a problem for someone. So the most promising business opportunity is always, can you offer something that solves a problem for someone? And you always want to focus on what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks that people are facing, and what solution can you offer? Also, small businesses thrive a lot by being part of a larger business's supply chain. So, and that's a point I often emphasize when I'm teaching more investment courses, but also in terms of looking for business opportunities. So if you want to invest in the AI space, the big name is NVIDIA. They are making and even NVIDIA itself as a business, how did they get so big? As everyone uses AI, it means then that the graphics capabilities have to improve across the board. So NVIDIA has made a huge business out of supplying really those graphic capabilities that support digitization and AI. But NVIDIA relies on suppliers. Who is doing the tweaks, etc. So in terms of looking for opportunities, it's really what problems can you solve for people and other businesses, and how do you insert yourself into someone's supply chain? Is there some feature of their business, some aspect? Because a lot of small businesses, successful SMEs, are really ones that are part of a larger business's supply chain. They are providing a service to a larger business. Now, in terms of the logistics, supply chain management, and I don't want to present digitization as a solution to everything, but the fact that there is that requirement for physical contact and movement is a large part of the supply chain problem. So the greater that the more you can digitize, then you are really reducing the time and effort required at different points along the supply chain. Now, clearly, a larger part of the supply chain issue is at the level of policy, where goods are coming through airports, seaports. I went to a seaport recently, declare a donation to our campus. And as I walked through the seaport, it seemed to me that the operation was more designed to create jobs rather than facilitate the movement of goods of goods rapidly through the port. So clearly, again, these are some of the key areas that policymakers can really assist SMEs, because those costs, those delays are just a higher proportion of the cost for small businesses than large businesses.
Okay, interesting. There's several questions I want to come back to very shortly, but I need to bring in Shukuka Amadefe, who is from Lagos in Nigeria, representing the fintech company Fiducia. And Fiducia is one of the sponsors of Small Business Week 2024. And we're very pleased to have them on the platform with us today. We're going to ask Shukuka to give us a short overview, very short presentation on the issue of financing, and then we'll continue the conversation because we have some questions we want to continue the engagement with our panelists. So welcome again, Shukuka, to the Caribbean. We have a Caribbean audience on the platform with us today. You can go right ahead and share with us on this issue of access to finance.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on the island. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. So I'll touch first on a few of the comments from the previous speakers so that we don't have to repeat these things. Key data around the SME's contribution to the Caribbean has been highlighted in Dr. Holder's presentation and Mrs. Terese's presentation as well. So I wouldn't speak too much on that. But what I want to touch on is the fact that the impediments are the same across all markets. In Africa as well, the same problems exist. Access to finance is a big issue for small businesses, largely around lack of information, lack of proper structure for smaller businesses to give the banks and financial institutions the level of comfort to take these lending decisions. And also access to market as well. Small businesses continue to struggle to be able to expand their businesses due to high overhead costs, high cost of finance, and also high cost of compliance. Professor Robinson spoke about high cost of compliance. It's also a common problem in our market as well. Now, as a solution, we've been able to. I will speak on two main areas. One, I'll talk about what Fiducia is and how, as an alternative solution, it helps to create opportunities for solving the access to credit problem for small businesses. And then I also touch quickly on the experience operating in Africa, where we have similar conditions, and to an extent, the solution should be able to give similar results in this region as well. So Fiducia is a supply chain finance marketplace focused on factoring. Now, the concept of factoring is very simple. Factoring is a method where a small business is able to exchange payments, outstanding payments from their customers for cash from a bank, from a provider of finance, from any partner who's willing to take over that responsibility, of course, for a fee. Now, why is it very important for a small business? Very often, small businesses have done business for various customers. In the previous session, we spoke about how small businesses are a very important part of the value chain of several large organizations. And for that reason, when they do the work, they have to adhere to the payment terms of these large businesses, which can be 30 days, 60 days, or even 90 days in certain jurisdictions. Now, what happens is that this money is tied up, and for that reason, they are unable to to do other things with their business, be it replenish their inventory, be it pay their employees and pay for their own suppliers for their own services. And of course, this leads to lost opportunities where ordinarily they would have been able to do additional work, earn more revenue, and of course grow their business. So Fiducia has been set up to solve this problem, and I'll explain why in the next few slides. Now, the key value proposition for Fiducia is the fact that by co-locating several companies, be it corporates, be it government, private sector, and small businesses, and of course providers of finance into one ecosystem digitally. And what happens there is you're able to have a small business submit or upload their invoices or their evidence of completed work onto the platform, and it is exposed to a number of financial institutions who have been, of course, pre-qualified. Now, this solves a very important problem because ordinarily, I mean, we've heard it from previous speakers. I know Mrs. Turner did mention this. The cost of finance for smaller businesses is very high. And this is a very important problem we need to solve. Even when they have access to it, it's very high. So what we've delivered here is a method of price discovery. So today in some markets, we have about 15 to 20 financial institutions participating. And what this simply means is that when an invoice is made available to the platform, on the platform, it is exposed to over 15 different institutions. And not just that, because it's an invoice that is built, that is based on work done for a corporate or a large, subnational or public sector entity. The risk around the small business is significantly reduced because now the bank is looking at the fact that the repayments or the risk of repayments is significantly reduced because it's part of the value chain payment for a large corporate. Very important factor that de-risks it, and we've seen that lead to significant adoption on the African continent. Other very important benefits that Fiducia is able to unlock is, of course, speed, because it's technology based. We spoke about how earlier speakers spoke about how I know Professor Robinson spoke about how digitization is very important. It improves, it generally improves, company registration, KYC, having a digital identity. It improves the turnaround time. I do like particularly the example of Estonia, where almost every government service can be accessed digitally. And this is what we've tried to do with Fiducia. We've brought everything into the platform, and this helps to achieve a quick turnaround time. Now, in Nigeria, we've seen quite a bit of success. I'll start with efficiency. The average time it takes to set up a customer is less than 24 hours. So if any customer today is interested, be it a small business, be it a corporate, be it a participating financial institution, they can get onboarded on the platform in less than 24 hours. And these are because of these discussions around digitization. How do we make sure the different parties are able to submit their details and get onboarded quickly? Now, we understand that the infrastructure in different markets or different regions would vary. So where there's credit infrastructure, of course, we'll be able to get better product efficiency. But where there is less reduced infrastructure, there will have to be other methods to be able to bring them all in. Another interesting feedback from the market experience in Africa is just the fact that we're able to attract a number of buyers. Today, we have over 100 large corporates on the platform. And for them, the value proposition has always been they want to be able to provide their vendors or the small business that work for them with enough opportunities to serve them better. So they ordinarily will tell them, look, there are opportunities for you to discount your invoices, get immediate cash, and be able to, you know, grow your business and do more business or provide more services for them. And this has seen us do quite a bit of business. Today and counting, we've been able to deliver almost $500 million of working capital to businesses on the continent. And, you know, we've seen small business ask for funds as low as $10,000 and as high as $250,000. So it varies between small, medium, and even large businesses. And, you know, in terms of transaction fulfillment rate, because of the fact that there are numerous banks and institutions on the platform, we're able to get almost 100% fulfillment. And it cuts across various sectors. Now, the DFIs have shown quite a lot of interest because factoring by its very nature helps to foster better trade, be it local trade or cross-border trade. So we've seen strong partnerships with Afrexim Bank. There's currently an MOU with Afrexim Bank, and I know they spent over a year in the region, and this is part of their initiatives. How do they drive factoring and help to catalyze the SMEs in the region? A few other things I'd like to just touch on very quickly. It's just an illustration here, very brief, shows how on the left side we have the small businesses and the corporates, and then on the right side we have a pool of financiers, and there's the steps that have to happen between the invoices being uploaded and value being sent back to the vendor through the participating bank. Key benefits, of course, speaking to the same things we've spoken earlier, it helps to create more opportunities for working capital, short-term payment cycles, and bridge cash flow gaps for small businesses, which is very, very important. As I say, cash is the lifeblood of any business. Then, of course, lowering cost of financing through the price discovery that is experienced because of numerous financial institutions, and the reduced risk because of the fact that now you're not just lending to a small business, but you're lending to a small business with the information around the counterparty that they're doing business with as part of the process. This significantly de-risks the transaction and enables banks to take a better, more informed lending decision. Then ultimately, it helps to promote economic growth in the region, leads to more job creation. We talked about how AI and other means of innovation is very important for growth of small businesses, and ultimately leads to a stronger economy, right? So this is just a bit of our information. Website is www.myfiducia.com. Please do spend time to look at it, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I thank you too. So we've received a short presentation, colleagues, today from Chukwuka Amadefe, who is the Chief Operating Officer in Fiducia. I mentioned a fintech company in Lagos, Nigeria. And Chukwuka is actually very knowledgeable in this field. I mean, he's been a business leader with over 2 decades of experience across a myriad of disciplines, including supply chain finance and financial technology and so on. And we've been talking about technology, access to finance, and here we have somewhat of a good marriage. So Chukwuka, let's get into a conversation, since you're talking about factoring as another solution to address the issue of access to financing. This is a perennial problem. We know that. We've been talking about equity financing in the earlier presentations, and here you are introducing another type of financing, factoring. And so my question really is there appetite for factoring? You know, tell us what has been the success story in Nigeria, maybe on the continent, because the truth is, as you rightly said, our MSME sectors are very similar in terms of the issues that affect the sector, the impediments that affect the sector. So, we want to hear what has been the performance of this. That's one. And two, while you're sharing, I'm going to ask all of those small businesses that are on the call to just drop in the chat for me. Here's my informal poll now. Would you want to consider factoring in your business as a type of financing to help you access the cash needed in your operation? Would you consider factoring as a solution to this impediment of access to financing? So drop in the chat. Let me say I want to do an informal poll now just to get a sense of how many of you think that yes, factoring is something you would want to consider. So Shukuka, could you share with us?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Holder. So, well, I would say the early stages of introducing factoring to every market happened also in Nigeria, it also happened in India, requires a lot of advocacy. Traditional financial institutions tend to need a bit of engagement discussions to be able to see how they can essentially implement it. So for us to solve that, what we've done is we've tried to develop what we call sample product papers, where we've helped banks and other lenders to, unpack all the areas that they need to think about, be it the risk factors, be it the legal considerations, be it the operational issues. And we put it in a simple, easy to use pack so that they can take it to their boards, take it to their management teams, take it to the governance structures in their institutions, and help to get them to approve it. So the early stages is always about advocacy, working with them. Then also, of course, there's also the awareness for the customers. Small businesses often never believe it's possible, but we have to explain to them that, look, if you are able to capture the business you've done, record it, and get the counterparty, the customer you've served, to provide an approval, a digital approval, then we can exchange it for cash. In some situations, we're able to exchange it for as much as 90% or even 100% of the invoice value. And it's very important that there's some legal agreements in place. So these are all things that we've tried to simplify through simple digital contracts. So I'll say something. The key elements here are simplifying the experience and then also helping the banks to understand the product. Once you can get those two things in place, and then you can be able to adapt it to any market. These are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm looking in the chat and looking at your comments. I'm saying yes, definitely. We would be interested in factoring. Here's a question, Chukuka, what's the cost to the vendor? What normally is the price point that the firm would have to consider for this new type of financial solution?
Well, what I'll say here is because of the fact that we have a number of banks participating, we can promise you that you'll have access to the absolutely lowest pricing for your market. Now, remember the point I was raised earlier that you will not be assessed as a small business from a pricing standpoint, but you'll be assessed based on the pricing, based on the risk of the business you are serving. So if you're serving a large corporate, for instance, you will certainly get lower rates than you'll be used to as a small business. So this is a significant benefit. And as we launch in the market, we plan to start with the Barbados market later this year. We will start to share more information about the pricing, about ways to onboard, and of course, other information you require.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chukuka. Just stay on the line for any follow-up questions on this. But let's bring back in Professor Robinson. I want to challenge you with some thoughts coming from Chanel here, following on from the question earlier about factoring and the presentation on the fiduciary product. What are your thoughts, Professor, on the issue of our banks? We know that they're traditionally very conservative. but do you feel that the credit requirements set by the banks are realistic for small firms? You know, how could these be adjusted, if any, to make it more accessible? Do you think that banks are doing enough to support startups? I'm trying to read all the questions here till we get one set of responses, if you will. What innovative banking solutions or technologies would you like to see that could improve access to financing for small firms?
Yes, well, you know, there used to be an ad on TV in Barbados, I think, for one of the entities. They said, think outside the bank.
Yes.
And
That was Globe.
yeah, I think that was Globe.
Yeah.
I guess I have modest, so a sort of a financial economist, you sort of think about it, that there are different players in a market and they have different risk profiles. And commercial banks, I think by their very nature, are really not designed to provide financing across the riskier end of the spectrum. There are certain services that commercial banks do well in terms of a payment platform, deposits, etc. But in terms of a source of financing, I think the presentation by Chukua is a classic example of the sort of broadening of our financial institution space that we need to see if we are to address some of the challenges that SMEs face, because I don't see banks as the solution. I think if we are looking to commercial banks to really take on this risk financing, innovative solutions aimed at riskier players, then I think we're not going to get very far. But receivables, when people don't pay you on time, the impact of that for a small business is just huge compared to a larger business. You have a smaller customer base and so on. So a capacity where you can factor your receivables and get some cash and begin starting again. I think these are critical innovations. So I don't think banks are doing enough. I don't think they will ever do enough. I don't think they are designed to do enough. And that is not necessarily their role in the financial services space. I think in the Caribbean, Barbados, what we need is to evolve, is for the financial system to evolve and have a much broader range of institutions that are funded differently from banks, that are regulated, and there's no reason to defend banks, or banks have their own problems, but banks face a particular type of regulation which informs their behavior. Their source of funding, where they rely on deposit funds that is available on demand. They are, for the most part, they are part of international networks, so scale is important for them. They're not gonna, so for a lot of reasons, they are not part of the solution. It's really to, and that's why my president emphasized the global, even regional perspective. So there are players like Cygnus Finance out of Jamaica, which I know has been doing financing in our space, where they are targeted at the SME sector. That is their space. They're trying to, there's a gap in the market. Commercial banks are not designed for risk capital. So who can provide the risk capital? And they're so players like what Chukua is presenting there, your Cygnus and other type players, they are really coming in to fill those gaps in the market. And I would encourage our SME players to educate themselves about these alternative players and seek to access that financing and think outside the bank.
Yes, I see you're using that slogan. Not so sure if it's copyrighted, huh? Okay, but thanks for sharing your thoughts there. You've actually addressed, I think, 4 or 5 queries that we had here on the banking system. But Chukwuka, there's a question here for you. The product that you shared earlier on factoring, as Professor Robinson rightly said, that we have to look at diversified solutions beyond the traditional debt financing provided by our banks. are these financial opportunities available in the Caribbean? So if one of our Caribbean colleagues wants to know when can they expect to see the fiducia product across the region?
So, I mean, we're currently on the island visiting as part of our market study, and we've seen that a lot of opportunity exists across the region. So I know in the next, starting from Barbados, over the next 12 to 18 months, we plan to do a swift rollout across key markets. Of course, we're working closely with Small Business Association to understand the market and ensure that we cover where has the strongest need, so to say. So yes, we'll be in the market close to you very soon, and looking forward to working with different small businesses in these markets. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Let me take one final time. We've actually run out of time, so I'm going to take one final question, comment here. I'm going to ask if Mr. Turner-Jones can weigh in on this one. From Norma Shuri, who is a part of the Caribbean Institute of Management Consultants, and know that the CDB had a database of consultants that was accessed. The question is, how do we get MSMEs and
Hi, Lynette, you're breaking up. I didn't hear the question at all. I didn't hear the question.
Okay.
For whatever reason you are. Maybe type it in the chat because you broke up.
The technology.
Lynette, you broke up. I didn't hear a word you said.
Okay.
That's better.
There you go.
Okay.
As I said, colleague, this is one of the challenges that we have with the use of technology. Right. So we're wrapping up now, but I just wanted to get you to weigh in on the point about the management consultants that we have in the region, and how can we mobilize them even greater to be involved in the capacity building of our MSME sector. I know CDB had a database of consultants, so I think that's a question coming from the Management Consultants Association here in the region.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. What I would say is that we need to stay in touch. We need to keep the conversation going, because I've met with this group from time to time in another life, but since I've been at CDB, I haven't. But maybe that doesn't mean that we're not consulting with them. But I think they definitely have a role to play, because they are at the front line of knowing what the capability gaps are. We are actually working right now on an implementation deficit around the region study, so to speak. I mean, I think we have a general idea of what some of the issues are, but we need to know country by country what's going on and why things take so long to happen, why we don't get the responses in time, why something that should take 5 years normally takes 10. So this region has a lot of issues to confront with, and I think today what we heard, and I especially like Justin's foray into artificial intelligence and how to use technology better to do some of these mundane things. Now in our meetings we use ChatGPT in our Teams meetings to generate the minutes. Now, typically, to write minutes of a meeting would take, somebody maybe a day to turn around. In 5 minutes after the meeting is over, we have a set of minutes that captures what happened in the meeting extremely well. I mean, we go through to make sure nobody is being misrepresented in what they said, but every single time we've used those minutes, they're flawless. So minutes, standard letters. He mentioned a whole other raft of things, but there are a lot of ways we can use technology to improve how quickly we can respond to clients, how we can do business better, and we just need to do it. So I would say to Norma that we need to stay in touch, because there are all manner of needs that need to be addressed across the region. And we'll be looking out for help to, close some of these deficits. But a lot of it is in what we have been discussing too. It's the regulations in place, it's the bureaucracy, it's the forms, it's things that are not digitized. It's just the way we do business in this region, which is always heavy on form and very, very low on substance and what we really ought to be focusing on. So I think once we start cutting through that, and you know what encourages me, Lynette, with all of this is our young people. So I have a 20-year-old. My 20-year-old will never, ever in her lifetime stand in line in a bank or stand in line anywhere to do anything, because that generation, they operate with their phones, they operate with their laptops, they operate in a digital world that's global, but also they thinking about, going into a bank is just something that they are not, that's not part of how they think they should navigate finance. So I think the change will come as generations change and as we are forced to adapt and as systems are forced to adapt, because as Justin said, there's so much happening with technology and it's going so fast that either we're going to catch up really fast or we're going to continue to fall behind. And I'd like to think that the young people in the Caribbean will not allow us to fall behind because they're already savvy on digital platforms. I don't think my daughter, all right, she has a couple of bank accounts in real banks, but when she's transacting business with her friends, they're using Venmo and this and that, things I don't even know anything about. So, PayPal, yes, but they have a whole different way of paying their bills in a restaurant, right? They use Apple Pay and they and no cash is used. So we're gonna have to catch up. And I think the same way we talk about digital payments, it's the same way we're going to be talking about other solutions across a whole sphere, a whole swathe of parts of our economy that need to be using digital ways of operating, including in agriculture. In Africa is where, in Kenya, for example, is where digital payments on the phone, M-Pesa started, right? And now it's everywhere. It's, farmers in remote parts of Kenya can get paid for their goods, not by having to go into a city or to get money, but because the money comes to them on the phone. So our region we've lost ground on how we use technology and we just need to catch up. And I'm really, really happy that Amadife was here to share the Fiducia story, because I think that can definitely be replicated in this region. And there are companies, there's some in, I can think of at least one in Jamaica that is doing similar work. But we just need to start pushing the envelope more, encouraging these digital solutions to get off the ground, supporting them either from a financial point of view or promoting them and what they do. So that this becomes the norm and not like some weird thing that only young people do. But all of us our life could be enhanced by, being able to stay home and do things that you have to drive around 50 times to get a parking space and to do business when, no, we don't need to do that anymore. There are other ways to do it. So I'm very encouraged. Lynette, I think you've really put together a great panel today, and I'm so happy to have participated. I think the future is bright. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Let's get Chikuka to give his final comments, and then Professor Robinson will ask you to do the same.
Thank you, Dr. Bunga. So I do echo the thoughts of Dr. Turner Jones. The future is certainly bright in the region. Just listening to the speakers, listening to the questions that are coming through, and just understanding a bit more about the region has made me see that the problems are the same across the different markets. The impediments exist. What is most important is having learning from other markets and essentially cutting that learning curve and implementing these solutions in these markets and helping us achieve progress quicker. And as Fiducia, we're happy to partner and work with various stakeholders to drive advocacy, to help implement factoring, and ultimately help to grow the economy in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Professor Robinson?
Yes, thank you. And again, I also think that the future is bright and the catalyst. I mean, I was laughing as Therese was mentioning the young people, and the catalyst can come from strange places, because, I'm from St. Vincent. St. Vincent recognizes Taiwan. And every year, about 40 or plus Vincentian students go off to Taiwan on these scholarships. And I got a call last week from a friend at the TV station wanting to do a program on digital payments. And I'm like, where the hell is this coming from? And she's like, but all these people are coming back from Taiwan and they've spent 3-4 years of their life not using cash. And when they come back home, they're going crazy and they're looking for all types. They say, well, we can't live like this. I'm lining up in a bank. We just don't do this. I go to buy some food and they don't walk with cash. So that catalyst is there. So this change is gonna come. I think it always requires leadership. And I think thought leaders need to play their role. So on my campus, one of the commandments is thou shalt not print. That's a commandment. Don't print, don't bring anything to me to sign. You can email that to me or let me put on a digital signature. So don't bring anything. So I think, so there are a lot of small things we can do. And as leaders, we have to lead, because otherwise we will become, as tourism-driven economies, we cannot remain competitive if we don't embrace technology, because except for a tiny niche of the market, when people go on holiday, they're not going to step back in time in accessing the services they normally do. So I think the future is bright and we need to make this change.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Robinson, for those final thoughts. We organize these sessions for those who may be new to our webinar series to bring relevant topics to our stakeholders, issues that they maybe need to be aware of to help in their business operations. And each time it's a topical issue that's being discussed. And I think that we've seen that today. We've heard from our experts, what we call the state of play, really, in the sector across the region and what we need to do. Rest assured that the association, will look at what are maybe the 3 key takeaways from today's conversation to inform our advocacy or our lobbying, but also to inform our education and our programming. We've heard that one, we need to use technology even more. We need to provide the tools. I believe it was Andrea and 1 or 2 others in the chat made a point about the tools for small firms to be able to adopt AI and use AI, not necessarily a guilt issue, but that they may not have the tools to be able to do so effectively. So we recognize that for sure. We need to look at the high cost of compliance to the sector. We have to improve productivity. Yes, we need to look at the cost of doing business, and therefore the cost of compliance has to be addressed. And with the perennial issue of access to financing, how can we see a diversification in the type of financing solutions that are brought to the market? And Fiducia is maybe the newest entrant, if you will, into the region with a product that is not necessarily unique to us, but one that has not really been marketed, and one that's not really been used in any significant way in the region. And I think that here's an opportunity now for us to bring factoring on the front burner, and other financing products, the junior market and the like. So folks, I would really want to thank you so much for sharing with us in our session today. For the benefit of all, please note all of our events are recorded, all of our sessions are recorded, and once we've completed the editing and so on, the webinar will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel that you can watch at your leisure and pleasure. So let me thank again our esteemed team of presenters. You know, Colloquium is really bringing together a number of subject matter experts to examine the issues of the day. And we thank sincerely Mrs. Turner-Jones, the Vice President Operations at the Caribbean Development Bank. We thank you as well, Professor Justin Robinson, Pro Vice Chancellor UE and Principal of the 5 campus. And we thank also Chukwuka Amadefe. I hope I've done justice to the pronunciation, Chukwuka. Thank you so much for being here in the region and coming on and sharing what's happening in Nigeria and your plans for bringing the product to the Caribbean region. We didn't have Tayana Mora from the Dominican Republic. She's been having challenges with internet. She really extended her apologies. She logged in a couple of times, but wasn't able to hold the Wi-Fi connectivity, so we weren't able to benefit from that. But we will have Tiana back with us in another session, I'm sure, in the ensuing future. Once again, folks, this has been an event organized as part of the Week of Activities for Small Business Week 2024, sponsored by Flow Business, and we thank you so much for being a part of it. This webinar was powered by the Caribbean Export Development Agency. We thank them as well for facilitating our discourse today. Thank you so much, everyone. See you on the next occasion. God bless. Let's hear from our sponsors now as we close out our session today. Bye-bye for now.